all of you all. My name is Liz Stegel-Lewis, and I have the blessing of getting to be a part of the Beyond Borders Global Department of Teach Beyond. And it's such a privilege to be here with our Beyond Borders members because we don't see each other very often, and with our Open Schools family and other Teach Beyond families. So a huge thanks to Angie, wherever she is, for being so welcoming and planning this time for us. So we have about 4 days of material that so part of why we wanted to come is to see how you guys do training and to try to think of how we can complement each other better and how we can develop training kind of similar, because Open Schools does it so well. So that's one of my goals, and so we want to learn from you all. I am going to breeze through this session, so I know it's not ideal teaching practice, but we have about an hour for Andre and I.
An hour and a half.
An hour and a half, excellent, okay, an hour and a half. So Andre is going to speak next. He is our Associate Director of Educational Programs, and he is from Brazil. Yeah, let's all clap for Brazil. So he's going to share with you some of the curriculum that he is using. But first, I'm just going to talk very briefly about trauma and its impact on learning. So, before we begin, I just want to share, this is the vision of Beyond Borders. Our vision is a world where no border... Oh, is it going on? Uh-oh. How do I make it not automatic? Okay, I'll just pause. Okay. So we envision a world where no border restricts access to an education that has the power to transform lives through Christ's love. So we want every child to have access to an education that allows them to become all God intends for them to be. So our mission is to extend Christ's love beyond borders, providing transformational education with those who are displaced. And with is really important. Okay, thank you. With is really important because we want to work with our learners and our families and their communities, and also with refugees and with nationals who are bringing and welcoming refugees into their communities. Does anyone see someone that you know in this photo? Yeah. My name is
Liz.
So this is a photo from our joint Beyond Borders and Open Schools Worldwide project in Ethiopia. So we are already working together in such a beautiful way in Ethiopia. We'd like to do that in other locations as well. So when we first started, I'm so sorry you guys, this is, okay. Not sure why that's on. So we developed guiding principles of education, and we recognize that the people that we're serving have been through trauma, or they might be experiencing trauma. We also know that trauma impacts people differently, but we know that the people that we're working with, almost all of them are living in quite stressful, unpredictable settings. And so the beauty of trauma-informed education is that it actually applies to everybody. Actually, the principles of trauma-informed education help every learner, and they particularly are just as powerful with students who are going through stress. And so I think you all can probably identify, we could spend an hour talking about the different ways how we see stress in our learners' communities. So we develop these guiding principles. We create transformational educational opportunities with an overarching commitment to learn to heal and to heal to learn, so that we can become all God intends for us to be. The following principles inform our educational practice. So before I go into those principles, I want to talk about this learn to, sorry guys, I do not know how to stop this. Okay, perfect, thank you. I want to share a little bit about what learn to heal is. And this is a phrase that someone on our team named Katie Shemp, she actually coined this phrase, and she did a whole master's thesis about this. And so we really wanted to take this concept of healing and learning, and how can we bring healing and learning together so it's happening simultaneously. So it's based on a lot of multidisciplinary study, as you can see. And it's really a holistic approach to education that especially integrates the expressive arts, because we are trying to develop a way where people have been through trauma or toxic stress can learn and can heal at the same time. So the brain's response to trauma limits and at times prevents people from functioning and learning in precisely the ways that help them move on and live as whole people. The parts of our brains that help us learn, that make informed decisions and think critically, when we were earlier talking about the cortex, those things happen in the cortex. Those are the same areas that shut down in response to trauma when our body goes into a fight, flight, or freeze state. So in contrast, the cycle of learn to heal, heal to learn seeks to use trauma-informed practices that bring learning and healing simultaneously together, resulting in the education's healing and learning components being integrated to the extent that they're indistinguishable. Thank you. So that they're indistinguishable. So we really want to find ways that the kids aren't even aware that they're they're doing things that will help heal them and help them learn at the same time. So this is a quick video on the impact of toxic stress and trauma on the brain.
Do we have sound?
Yes.
No, it's a bit hard to hear. We can just skip it.
Learning to deal with stress.
Okay, does anyone have any questions? I'm so sorry, we're just breezing through this, but we don't have a lot of time. So we'll just skip the video. We've talked a bit about this, so I think it's okay. We can move on. Okay, so I want to start, these are our guiding principles. And a team from Beyond Borders got together and we spent time discussing what would our guiding principles be. And so all of these are trauma-informed practices that you would place in your educational settings. So these are principles, like Allison was sharing that the safeguarding curriculum is principle-based. This is similarly principle-based. So whenever you're setting up a learning environment with your teachers, whenever you're looking at a curriculum or instruction, you want to make sure that it fits into this framework. So the very most important thing, who would like to share with us? What is the most important aspect of trauma-informed? What do you guys think is the most important aspect of trauma-informed care or education? So we learned about Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Provide a safe place.
Yeah, so providing a safe place is just really the bedrock of the foundation. And that can look really different. A safe and loving environment can look different. And I loved how Angie at the conference was talking about excellent learning environments. And I think part of the reason those environments were so excellent without a building is because of the safe and loving foundation in the relationships that are created. And so it's really good. We won't take time now, but it's excellent with your teams. If you want to use these principles, you can reflect together as a team. How do we create a safe and loving environment in this context? What are things we can do to improve what we're doing? What are things that we could do better? And just encourage each other, because I think often with the problems that we see, we can get really discouraged because they feel so overwhelming, but there's nothing as healing as a loving, safe relationship for the children that we're working with. And so as hopeless as it might feel sometimes, it's not. You know, God has the power to work in these loving environments to create changes in these kids' lives, and you all are paramount to that. So the importance, we'll go back. So small traumas, big traumas, I'm forward, thanks. And these patterns, unpredictable patterns that are chaotic, toxic stress, as we said before, they activate the stress response and they shut down the cortex. So if your brain is like this, if your cortex is shut down for learning, then you're not going to be able to reason, you're not going to be able to learn new things. So everything begins with a sense of safety. Our brains feel safe when we belong. So belonging and creating belonging is so important. And especially with refugees, this is over and over one of the biggest things I hear from refugees I feel like I don't belong. I feel like I've been excluded. I've lost my home. I've been kicked out in a way because I'm fleeing my country. And now I'm in an environment and I feel like I do not belong in this environment. And that seems like one of the greatest gifts, especially with refugees that we get, but with everybody. Everybody has this need. Our next guiding principle is our commitment to collaboration and mutuality. Does anybody have an example of how you might be putting this into practice in your learning setting? Collaborating and mutuality, mutual benefit. Any examples?
Repeat the questions.
Yes, so this is our commitment to collaboration and mutuality. So in your learning context, how do you collaborate with the local community, maybe with your parents? How do you collaborate with the children? How do you make this environment a space where there's a mutual benefit? Where there's a sense of mutuality, we're all working together. Is there any thoughts on that? Yes.
It's not a huge thing, but we do have a parent day. Our children have never been to school before, so I think of it similar to open house in America, where the parents come in and the children get to demonstrate and show what they're learning. And it's just a huge pat on the back to the kids, and the parents get to see that. And I think what I've noticed in Ethiopia where we worked, it's the first experience for them to have something like that, the parents. And they cry, they just shine with smiles. They're so excited to see what their kids have learned, but also I think just to feel included. I remember one time, especially when we were walking them around the building and showing them the different classrooms, I could just see how they, felt so important because they were going on this tour, and I'm sure they've never experienced something like that. And it was just amazing. These people are usually feeling so displaced, so I think the parents really felt included. Fortunately, we only really do it once a year. We do have programs that they're, I think, invited to, but I wish we could do it more, and we could probably try to. But
That's such a good example, and something I know that Toy had done too in this setting. She would actually really honor the parents and say, I know how big of a sacrifice it is for you to send your children to our program, because it means you won't be able to send them to collect recyclable materials. And I think that was really honoring to actually recognize to them, like, we're in this together, you're sacrificing something, you're investing it, even though it's so small. And these are parents who never, in the context in Cora, a lot of these parents have never felt their kids would go to school. Like, it's not something that they've been dreaming about their whole lives. With the refugees where we work, the parents, it is when you say, what do you need? They say, an education for my child. Like, this is the most important thing. But in some communities, it's not even really been something that was even thought would be a possibility. Yes.
I think of the context where we are in the north of Kenya, and we've got where we are working from is an unused government clinic that was built in 2017, and has been a real sore point to the community, because as far as they're concerned, this facility was built so that they could have their medical needs met. But the government has never sent anybody there, so they have to travel 20 kilometers away to be able to get any form of clinical help. So the chiefs in the area, or the elders, graciously allowed us to use that building. It's the only building in that area apart from the primary school, for us to use it to run the literacy and program. And it's been such a blessing to see the families, moms, dads coming. The children are there. We'll do because we also use it as a time to preach the gospel, to share the gospel. So they'll have the children because it's got two verandas. So the children will be on one side doing Sunday school and a bit of literacy, and the parents as well will be on one side also being taught the gospel and also doing a little bit of literacy with them. So it now ends up not being something that's a bad, a sore point to the community, but actually now that clinic can be now a place for actual healing, not physically, but actually spiritually, and also beneficial to the community, because the little ones and the adults are also benefiting from it, because it's a community that has over 80% or 90% of them are illiterate, both the children and the adults.
That's amazing. That's such a good example. So we really are trying to work with the community. I think that's such a good example. When we first started working, actually there's some books I wanted to pass to these 3 tables, and you guys can kind of pass those around while we're talking. And they're pictures of a refugee camp in Greece. This is not the one that we work in, but we do work, not this one actually. And this looks similar to some of the contexts where we started working. And when we first started, Alan was with us. This was how Beyond Borders and Open Schools first came together. It was in 2018. And Phil connected us to Alan. So it's just been amazing to see how we've all come together. But and we were trying to do a program like a summer camp for kids. And we thought, oh, these parents have been through so much, they probably just want a break. You know, we were thinking about ourselves as parents. Oh, it'd be nice to have a break. So at first we were just working with the children, but then it was so clear within the first 2 hours that the parents needed to be drawn in as well, that we shouldn't do this separate from the parents. So then we invited the parents to participate as well. It was amazing to see the change in the parents who'd gone through this trauma. The last thing they actually wanted to do was just to sit. You know, just to sit there. It was so much better to say, do you guys want to do the activities? And they started drawing, and they started building things and working with clay, and it was amazing just to see the letdown. Like you could just physically see the parents, you know, just breathing. Yes.
One thing I've noticed, it's kind of hard as an English teacher, but if you give refugees colored pencils, they don't need you for like the next 45 minutes. That's all I wanted to share.
And you can do this in simple, oh yes, yeah.
Yeah, for us, I think it's similar to the context that she was also bringing in. We have some of the projects in the villages, and so what we have seen is the community coming together, and we have seen open schools begin to bring in development into the community, because the communities begins to see this as an opportunity for them, knowing that they don't have schools in their areas because and children have to travel long distances to go to school. They see it as an opportunity, and they get together, forming committees, and they begin to mold blocks, and they begin to bring crushed stones, and they begin to bring sand, and they just begin to ask you for what they cannot manage to do. And you begin to help them, just come alongside them, support them, and they begin to develop, from our open schools, they begin to develop community schools.
That's amazing.
And as a church also, you know, so this is like a collaboration between open schools, the church, and the community. As a church also, we are coming in with the preaching of the gospel. They embrace us with that alongside the community schools and the open schools. We are being given land also to begin to just develop church there and begin to worship with the communities. So
I'm just gonna cry. Alan told me you didn't. I gave a presentation a couple days ago. He said you didn't cry. Now I'm gonna cry. It's just so beautiful and so powerful, really. And I think these are. One thing I want to encourage is that sometimes we hear like trauma-informed education or learning, and we might think, oh, that sounds like it, I don't know, maybe it sounds complicated, but it's actually really not complicated. I think it's woven into who we are as believers, and I think it's good to just appreciate that. And sometimes these principles, we can just use it as a framework. If we're not doing this, then we've gone off track, but that's so touching. And yeah, I would love to hear about more of these stories. So this kind of goes along with that. It's our commitment to empowering learners, their families, and communities. So just recently, we've been walking through a really hard situation in Ethiopia, and Abra and Mesfin have. So we work on the trash dump community, and you can imagine a lot of these parents. They're very disempowered and illiterate, don't have any education, And what I've been so amazed at is that we've been trying to register the kids into ABRA's program. And they've been working with the parents to have the parents go to the local government office and say, we want to unenroll our child from the last program they were in, and we want to enroll them in this program. That, to me, that shows the transformation that's happening, that these parents are actually the ones going and saying, we want more for our kids to the government office, you know, and these two guys have just been incredible with trying to empower parents. So I think that's really important, because the more we can empower the families, the more change we're gonna see for these kids and for their communities. I'm sorry, we're just breezing through this. We also are committed to provide choice within structure. So often we say choice and voice. So for people who've been through trauma, we really want them to help get their voices back and also to give them choices, because with trauma, it's when you feel threatened. You know, it's either the perception of threat or when actually something has threatened you and taken something away from you, and you've lost your ability to choose. You've lost your power in that situation. So one of the best things when you're working with children and adults in trauma is to create predictable, routine, stable environments. So a lot of I think Open Schools does, you know, just like the kids always know how the lesson will go, and you're forecasting it, so they know what's gonna happen. That gives them a sense of stability. But then we want to offer these choices. So, you know, as simple as what I was saying before, would you like to play with the clay, or would you like to jump rope? You know, but to still always try to offer choices so that they can regain a sense of, I have some control over my body, over my decisions, and that's really healing. So the next guiding principle is to focus on narrative. So narrative is stories. So, you know, we look at the Bible and we see God's grand story for our lives. And we all live our lives according to stories. And some of the stories that we tell ourselves are not helpful for us. And some of the stories that we tell ourselves are helpful for us. So a story that's not helpful is, I'm no good, I'm worthless, because we can fill that in. The opposite story is, I went through this, but God helped me. God brought this community of people around me, and God gave me the strength, and you know, I am so proud of myself, and now I can help other people who are going through the same thing. And it's radically different. And so one of the things that in trauma is that it's actually the meaning that we make of what happened that really impacts our ability to heal. So if we can't move from a story that's very destructive for us to a story that's very empowering, where we actually can give positive meaning to it, then it's going to be really hard to get unstuck from that trauma. So narrative is a way that you can give people a voice. And with that meaning making, it's a very gentle process, because we all know we don't want to say to someone who's grieving, who's just been in trauma, well, you know, one day you're going to be really strong. You know, that might feel a little bit unempathic. So we can validate someone's story and how they're feeling, but we can slowly try to move them to another story. And that's usually going to take quite a bit of time. But it is important to remember that the meaning people make of their lives has a big impact on how they will be resilient. With narrative, something that's a love, like I'm gonna have Becky share something and I'm gonna share something else. So an activity that we've done with Beyond Borders that I just love is having children create their own books. So in the settings we work, we often don't have books, right? Probably you all don't have many books. So something that we've done that I just think is brilliant is we've allowed children and adults to write their own books. And it's a great activity to also use with people who are learning another language. And because it also offers choice within a structure. So you could actually just, if you had paper, maybe it's even recycled paper, you could make a book, staple it together, and then you could say to the children, okay, we're gonna write a book. You could do this in a group, or you could do it individually. So with a group, say, I'm just gonna give an example from open schools. If it was the but, maybe we'll say, Billy has a ball. And then I say, okay, Andre, now you're gonna write the next page. What does the next page say? Billy has a ball. Now you're gonna make the next page of the story.
Billy has the bat.
Billy has the bat, and then you have the kids draw a picture of Billy with the bat. And then Eric, what is the next page gonna say?
Billy hits the ball with the bat.
Billy hits the ball with the bat. Oh my goodness. And the kids don't have to be able to write it. Because in learning a second language, you learn to speak before you learn to write. So you can handwrite it in lovely letters and they illustrate it. And then you have a collection of readers for your children. And it gives them voice because they get to choose what's in the story. And it becomes a really authentic project because then they're so proud of themselves when we say it's reading time and we pull out the books that they've actually made. When you do it individually, it's also a great way for kids. Writing is such a great way to process your trauma as well. And it allows you to do it at what you want to write and what you want to share. So you'll often have some stories that might say, I like pizza. Pizza is good. And maybe that's what the child wants to share. And so you're giving them a voice to share what's in their heart. And that might be where they're at. They don't want to talk about their boat ride over from Turkey to Greece. But you'll have other children who will say, I was on a boat. I'm scared. The sea is scary. And they'll share that and they'll draw pictures. And you don't have to, your job is then to listen and acknowledge what they're sharing with you. You don't have to ask lots more questions. We're not counselors or therapists, but you can let them express. And that actually is healing for them if you're an empathic listener to what they want to share. And Becky's gonna share another tool for our toolkits.
So earlier today, when you guys were talking during the safeguarding session about regulation of the brain, one of the narrative tools that you can use that is super helpful for regulating the brain is telling stories, but a specific type of story. And so this is a story that names an emotion, that tells what you are feeling in your body, because often we don't have the words for the emotions that we're feeling, but you know what the feeling is. And then how did you return to a place of joy or peace from that emotion? And so the key here is you don't want to use a really deep, intense emotion because you don't want to trigger your audience, but just a light emotion. It's still a hard emotion, but it's not an intense feeling. So I'm going to tell you what we call a 4+ story, and you're not saying to a kid, okay, this is how you should resolve this. You're just telling it as you're telling your lesson. Mitchell did this a little bit when he was doing his presentation at the conference. So I've told the story to a couple of people already today, but the emotion that I'm going to talk about returning to joy from is fear. And I have 2 nephews, and at the time, 4 nephews, but at the time I had 2. And I had a nephew that was 3 and a nephew that was 2. And we went to a butterfly pavilion. So it was all these butterflies in an enclosed area. And I had my 3-year-old nephew's hand, and we walked into the butterfly pavilion. And I realized as I walked in there and all of these butterflies were fluttering around me, I could feel my stomach tightening and I could kind of feel my breath coming, shortness of breath. And I thought, oh my goodness, I'm afraid of butterflies. Who's afraid of butterflies? So I had to take some deep breaths and I'm holding my nephew's hand and I could feel myself starting to clench it. And I was like, okay, he's 3 years old. I don't want to transmit this fear. So I'm telling myself to breathe and I'm letting go, releasing my hand just a little bit. And I'm kind of hurrying, and I hear my little 2-year-old nephew behind me go, oh, there's a butterfly on Mommy! And I'm thinking, okay, don't scream. Breathe in deeply, and we get out of there, and I release the kids, and we kind of shoot them off to go see something else, and I turned to my sister-in-law, and I was like, oh my gosh, Courtney, I'm afraid of butterflies. I didn't know how that, I didn't even know. And we kind of had a laugh about it, and she's like, it's okay, you did a good job, the kids weren't scared, and we moved on. I returned to joy from fear because I was caring for my nephew. And it's just a short story like that, 2 minutes, and then you move on. So in the open schools example, JJ, when he raised his hand and he was like, I don't have a father, and Mitch, you talked about, that's sad, but let me introduce you to another father. This would be a great place where you could tell a 4+ story. When I was really sad, this is what I did to return to joy. And JJ, I'm going to introduce you to this. And then move on. And it takes 2 minutes. You can do it in a classroom of 100 kids, and it doesn't take time away from that. It's not something you have to do individually. But the more that you tell these stories with the body sensations, and then how you return to joy, the more you're helping their brains go, aha, there's a pathway I can take to get back to joy as well. So that's another way you can use a narrative story.
That's such a good example, Becky, with the story you shared, Mitch. Morse and Mitch. Get the two names. That's great. Does anyone have any thoughts about this use of narrative, or any reflections or ideas to share? Okay, we'll move on. So our next guiding principles are commitment to support environments that nurture a sense of wonder and joy. So the example I gave earlier about, I have something really precious in my hand. What do you think I have in my hand? Would you like to see it? Yeah. Just a little peek. Look at what God's made. Feel it. So smooth. How did it get so smooth? So I've worked in a lot of places just like you all, where there's just tremendous suffering, and you just walk into it and you think, how can anything be right in this world? But I found that in these really dark places, beauty and light shines really bright when you see something beautiful, because it's so different than what you see around it. So we want to capture these little things, even if they're small. In Lesbos, where we were with refugee kids in the camp, it was a barren camp, but then there were these wild tomatoes that were coming up around the camp. And it was so beautiful to see this barren ground with these little tomatoes, and they tasted so beautiful. So helping the kids recognize what's beautiful among them. And often they'll be the beautiful ones. And the teachers, like going to Moy Plus, I recognized you. You were what was beautiful, joyful. And those wildflowers, when you walk through, for those of you who've been to the trash dump in Way Plus, those flowers, they were beautiful. And then finally, our last guiding principle is our integration of expressive arts into our learning programs. Expressive arts are an amazing tool. We had some more things about trauma in the brain, but I was kind of sharing some of them. That the way the brain develops for a child who's gone through so much stress, even in utero, it impacts the child's development when they're in their mother's womb, is that it just shuts down those areas of the brain that are needed for learning. So the last thing we want to do for children who haven't had access to education is to put them in a classroom where they will not be successful in learning. Because how demotivating is that? If they haven't had access, they want to go to school, they come to the classroom, and then they feel like it's just reinforced, I'm no good, I'm not smart, I don't understand these things. But if you incorporate the arts into your learning and into the learning, then you're opening up the brain so that they can learn these things. And you make it fun and it's playful, and it just kind of does seem like magic, it's science, but suddenly they're learning because you're not stressing out the brain even more, because those areas really shut down. So I'm just going to really briefly go through these slides. You can just hit the next. So visual arts. So visual arts, we can find super creative ways to do this, even if you're out under a tree, on the ground, arranging rocks, right? Like you could be so creative, even drawing. You have to think of the child safety aspects of it, but I know my kids love it. We play a game where I draw something on their back, or they draw on my back, I had to guess what they were drawing. So or on your arm, that might be better than a back. Like, okay, I'm gonna draw something on the arm, look away, and they have to guess what they're drawing. So you can even do it if you don't have materials. But this is what's actually happening when you're using visual arts. It increases functional connectivity of the brain, leading to greater stress resistance. It helps you externalize negative thoughts, increasing their impact. So that story of the child crossing in a boat, and maybe the boat almost sank. The child drawing the boat, even if they're not talking about it, that's fine. They don't need to talk about it. This actually helps them externalize those negative thoughts. Maybe they're so afraid they were going to drown, and they're carrying that in their body, that fear. Well, every time they draw that picture of the boat, it starts to actually change the way that their body is responding, because it's not hidden anymore. It's actually coming out. It reduces stress and symptoms of compassion fatigue. So for, David was saying the coloring for 45 minutes, because they're going through so much stress, and I think it's about 15 minutes that they can actually see significant changes in the brain after you're coloring. So it really lowers your cortisol levels. And so we all go through compassion fatigue. So it's great for us to do things with our students and in our own time that help us to not be so stressed out. Because if we feel stressed out, the kids will pick up on that so quickly. And so we really have to take care of ourselves. It helps reduce feelings of shame and denial, and it stimulates cognitive functioning. So we'll go to the next slide. So I'm sorry, again, this is so much information. We'll just keep going. But I just want to show there is science behind this. And this is a photo of someone, they created this visual art piece, Welcome to Canada. And this is the words that the ESL, it was an adult, but they couldn't use the words. This was actually from Katie Shimp. I just want to give credit to her. But they were able to draw a picture and try to say what was in their heart. Welcome to Canada. And they drew a picture over here, and I think it's a father and a child, and they said, actually the meaning they ascribed was, Canada is like my father. And that was the words they could use to actually say what was in their heart. So they couldn't say all these things and express themselves, but with this picture, they could express themselves. And what an amazing meaning to make out of all of this is that I was welcomed. And it was, there's the tears. There's tears coming down from Syria and the bombings. But you welcomed me. Another is expressive writing. So this might be harder for the kids that we're working with, but for adults, if they are capable of this, expressive writing is a great tool. And it could be a great tool for us too, journaling. Actually, Toy, do you want to share about little Sifan and what she told you on the phone? Oh, this is perfect example.
One of our students that, as she shared, we had some hard stuff going on in Ethiopia, so we have 4 classrooms, and 3 of our classrooms was with one partner, and 1 classroom was with our other partner, which is Abra. So our one of the little girls that was in the partnership that's had to kind of stop for the time being, they've been waiting and wanting to be with us again. And her name is Sifan, and I was especially close to her because we had 2 classrooms going, and of course I wanted to keep adding. And Liz was kind of like, well, that requires more money. But anyway, I met Sifan on the road one day, and she just folded her little arms and with the cutest little picture of her, and she just says, "Why am I not in school?" Which is very not something you see with Ethiopian children. They're very, and I didn't consider her rude, but some Ethiopians might have, because she was very forceful and to come up to a foreigner and just say that on the road, But it was actually very touching to me, and I was like, oh my goodness, we have to start this classroom that's been on my heart. And anyway, then the Lord provided a donor for us to have 15 more students in that classroom. And so I always tell Sifan, like, you are the one that, God used you. So anyway, she's loved school and loved it, and so it's been especially hard on her. And actually Mesvin's wife and I are quite close, and his wife's been working with the families that are part of the organization but are no longer in our program. So Sifan's family is one of them. And so one morning I woke up and Efrata was calling me. I actually wasn't even up yet, but I was like, oh, it's Efrata. So I answered it, and it was little Sifan. And she was saying, when are you coming? I want to be back in school. And then she said, I've been writing, when I think of you at night, I've been writing letters to you, telling you I want to be back with you. I'm praying for you. I'm praying we can be back together. And so it was very touching. And I said, that's exactly what you should be doing. You keep doing that, Sifan. And so.
Thank you for that example. So she's journaling. Isn't that amazing? And I love how Toy just reinforced, you're journaling, Sifan. That's a wonderful way to express yourself. So pretty amazing with this little 8-year-old, and Cora is journaling letters to her teacher. Okay, we'll move on to the next one. And the next slide. So one thing that I get really excited about is because in Africa, so I feel very passionately that Africans are so trauma informed in the way that you guys live life. Like just the way that you have community and relationships are so important, and how much beautiful singing and dancing and movement is just put into your culture. There was a study in Rwanda working with people that have been through genocide that dance, like a dance group, was more effective than having access to psychologists. Like the dance group was better than the psychologist. So I just want to encourage us that in the context we work, like in Lesbos, there's one psychologist, right? So and at that time there were 20,000 people, there's one psychiatrist. And everyone was like, well, they're on a waiting list because they need to see this psychologist. Well, what do? You have to wait in a group of 20,000 people for the one professional. You dance. So this is something, and what I love about this is in your cultures and places, you can do whatever, you already have dance built in. So nobody has to teach you. You just have to know, you can even, some of the kids are, why are we dancing in class? We're dancing because it helps you learn. Like we're dancing because it helps you feel good. Like it's important in your learning. And there's so much research to show the importance of movement, of dancing, of rhythm. So this is music. So it's just, it releases oxytocin. So I don't know, when you breastfeed your baby, that's what's released. It's just this love hormone that makes you feel amazing. So keep singing and dancing. The next slide. Rhythm. And then we talked about breath, movement, and dance. Promotes increase in body awareness, social competence, distance from aggression, and closeness to others, decreases anxiety and depression, improves mood and body image, activates mirror neurons that help individuals empathize and increase interpersonal connection. Breathing rhythm affects memory and fear responses, decreases PTSD symptoms. So it's so brilliant. We all have it at our fingertips. And then drama. In our program in Cora, I just love seeing the kids doing drama. Mesfin and Avra have done such a great job of this, and they just love it. And it's another thing that increases self-esteem, memory functioning, lowers level of impairment from trauma symptoms, helps regulate anger and develop a sense of closeness. It gives you a way to embody and process your emotions and your experiences, and it lets you step into someone else's shoes, and it gives you multiple perspectives. So it also increases your sense of personal agency, personal control over your life, and you get to practice your feelings. So if you're playing a character who's really sad, you get to, in another person, like you don't have to actually experience your sadness, you get to step out of yourself, step into a character, and allow that character to be sad. Because often it's quite frightening sometimes to process our own emotions. So kids can do this in a setting like this very safely. And also, you can learn you can role play. How do you deal with, we role play a lot in Lesbos. We have kids in the camp, there's people from 40 countries. And a lot of those people have been at war, and there's huge tensions. So you can role play peace building in these kind of scenarios. The next slide. And then symbolic imagery. This is another way. So you can see the key. So you might just bring one key to the lesson. And again, I think this is something you can do with a large group. And what does this mean? What are we going to unlock? Like you can just create, what does the key mean? the little box. You could make these little boxes out of match boxes and teach them about, sometimes it's good to put your, like things are so hard, we have to take those and we have to put them in the box. We don't want to get rid of them, but we'll put it in the box and we'll come back to that feeling later. So there's just a lot you can do in simple ways with symbolism. And Lesbos, one of our teachers, it was really brilliant. She wanted to, in her class, it was with adults, but she would take pictures, beautiful pictures. And she wanted to bring beauty into the classroom, and she would say, what does this picture mean to you? And again, they used the language they could to write or to say what they could. And it was so trauma informed because it gave them a choice, so it had a structure, but it let them choose. And it also gave them a way to work with the symbol. So there might have been a beautiful, I think one story she shared was, it was a window, and there was a beautiful scene and someone was looking out. And one of her students, they said, I feel trapped, I'm behind the window, I can't get into the world. Like, so how powerful to be able to draw that, and that's what they wanted to share. Whereas another person who didn't want to go there could say, I see a picture of trees and flowers, you know what I mean? And this is, so it just gives you this choice and allows you to use this symbolism. And then the last expressive arts mechanism is craft, handicraft, and especially repurposing items. So where better to repurpose items than on a trash dump or in places where we don't have lots of learning equipment and materials and games, we can make our own. And that is actually really therapeutic. Manual competence in creating or fixing things, it increases our confidence. It helps to buffer toxic chemical buildup in the brain, maintaining cognitive ability. It's self-soothing and increases general feelings of happiness. It eases the intensity of fearful thoughts and anxiety. It elicits brain processes to help regulate strong emotions and reaps benefits as a form of mindfulness and meditation. So being creative and thinking, how can we repurpose things in our environments has a hugely therapeutic element